The letter sat on the weathered table, pristine against the rough-hewn wood, mocking Victoria Mitchell as surely as the town gossips who'd seen her receive it from the stagecoach driver. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the crisp paper once more, the words promising a life she desperately wanted to believe in. Dear Miss Mitchell, I write to you as a friend of your late father's. He often spoke of his beloved daughter in Boston. I regret to inform you that before his passing, he entrusted me with a deed to a considerable property in Silverwood Creek. As his only living kin, this land rightfully belongs to you. I encourage you to make the journey west, where opportunity awaits. It was signed simply, a friend, with instructions to collect the deed at the Silverwood Creek post office upon her arrival. Victoria had sold nearly everything she owned in Boston to make the journey. Her father had disappeared west 8 years ago when she was 18, leaving only vague letters about striking it rich. The last correspondence arrived 3 years ago, and she'd assumed him dead until this mysterious letter arrived. The tiny rented room above Silverwood Creek's only restaurant felt oppressive as the late afternoon sun slanted through the window. Victoria could still hear Mrs. Reynolds' laughter echoing from earlier that day. Land deed. Honey, how many girls get this same story? Some stranger's letter promising riches, and here you come with your fancy dresses and city ways. The woman had clucked her tongue. Your pa, God rest him, wasn't nothing but a drunk who lost everything at the card tables before the fever took him. Ain't no land deed waiting for you. Victoria swallowed hard, fighting back tears. The postmaster had confirmed no letter or deed awaited her, and the skeptical looks from the townspeople only worsened her humiliation. She'd been a fool to believe, to hope. A knock at her door startled her. Victoria quickly dabbed at her eyes before opening it to find Mrs. Reynolds, the innkeeper's wife, standing with her arms crossed. Got a gentleman asking after you downstairs. Says he heard there was a Mitchell girl in town. She raised an eyebrow. Tall fella, dusty from the trail. Want me to send him away? Victoria's heart pounded. No, I'll come down. The restaurant was mostly empty as Victoria descended the stairs. Near the entrance stood a man with his back to her, broad-shouldered and tall, a worn leather hat in his hands. When he turned, Victoria was struck by clear blue eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. Miss Mitchell. His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder. Yes, her own voice sounded small. Name's Wade Quincy. He extended a calloused hand. I knew your father. Victoria hesitated, feeling Mrs. Reynolds' eyes burning into her back. Another person claiming to know her father. The entire town already thought her naive. Did you now? She asked, not taking his hand. He withdrew it slowly, nodding. Can we speak privately, Mrs. Reynolds chuckled from behind the counter. Another tale of hidden fortune for our Boston lady, Mr. Quincy. Wade's expression remained steady, but Victoria noticed the slight tightening of his jaw. Nothing of the sort, madam, just delivering on a promise to an old friend. Victoria led him to a corner table, painfully aware of the whispers. Mr. Quincy, I've already been made to look quite the fool. If you're here to, your father saved my life in '68, he interrupted softly. Mining accident near Sacramento. We rode together for 3 years after that. Victoria studied him. He was perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and a small scar above his right eyebrow. His clothes were worn but clean, and there was something in his eyes, a steadiness that made her want to believe him. The letter that brought me here, was it from you? She asked. Wade shook his head. What letter? Victoria told him about the mysterious correspondence, watching his expression darken as she explained how she'd spent her savings to travel west, only to find no deed awaiting her. Your father did have land, Wade said quietly. but he lost it 2 years back before he died. Then why are you here? Wade reached into his jacket and withdrew a small leather pouch. Your pa asked me to find you if anything happened to him. Took me a while, tracking you from Boston to here. He pushed the pouch toward her. It ain't much, but he wanted you to have it. Inside the pouch was a gold pocket watch she recognized immediately as her grandfather's, along with a folded piece of paper. It was her father's handwriting, the familiar scrawl bringing tears to her eyes. My dearest Victoria, if you're reading this, I've failed to make good on my promises to return. The watch was your grandfather's, the only thing of value I didn't gamble away. The man delivering this is Wade Quincy, the finest person I've ever known. Trust him. He's a better man than your father ever was. Victoria looked up, tears streaming freely now. Thank you for this. Wade shifted uncomfortably. There's something else. That letter that brought you here, it wasn't just some coincidence. There are folks in these parts who make a habit of luring young women west with false promises. Why would anyone do such a thing? Mining towns are desperate for women. Some men aim to marry them, others have worse intentions. His face hardened. That stage you arrived on, was there a man named Everett who took special interest in you? Victoria felt a chill. The driver. He was very attentive, said he'd help me get settled. He's coming back through town tomorrow. Wade leaned forward. Miss Mitchell, I don't mean to frighten you, but you need to be gone by then. Gone? But I have nowhere to go. Panic rose in her chest. I spent everything to get here. I've got a small ranch about a day's ride from here. You can stay there until you decide what you want to do. Head back east or... He trailed off. Victoria laughed bitterly. And I should trust you because of a note, after already being deceived once. Wade held her gaze. You can believe this one, he said softly. I promised your father I'd look out for you if needed. I aim to keep that promise. Mrs. Reynolds approached their table, her curious eyes darting between them. Everything all right over here? Just fine, madam, Wade answered. Miss Mitchell and I are catching up on family matters. When the woman retreated, Wade lowered his voice. Meet me at the livery at dawn if you decide to come. If not, I understand, but be careful who you trust in this town. After Wade left, Victoria sat alone at the table, turning her father's watch over in her hands. The familiar weight of it, the tiny scratch on the casing where she dropped it as a child, these details confirmed its authenticity in a way no stranger's letter could. But trusting this cowboy meant abandoning what little security she had. As darkness fell, Victoria packed her few belongings. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with faceless men chasing her through endless desert. Dawn broke with a pale golden light as Victoria slipped quietly down the back stairs of the boarding house, her carpetbag clutched tightly. She'd left payment on the table, unwilling to face Mrs. Reynolds' knowing smirk again. The livery stable sat at the edge of town, and Victoria's heart sank when she saw no sign of Wade. Had this been another cruel joke? Just as she turned to leave, a shadow moved from inside the stable. You came. Wade led a saddled chestnut mare and his own larger stallion into the morning light. This is Penny. She's gentle. Mr. Quincy, Victoria hesitated. I'm not entirely certain this is wise. Wade secured her bag to the saddle. It's a hard country for a woman alone. But I promise you'll be safe with me, and if you want to leave after we reach my place, I'll see you safely to the next proper town. As they rode out of Silverwood Creek, Victoria couldn't help looking back at the cluster of buildings shrinking in the distance. Her great western adventure had become something entirely unexpected. They rode mostly in silence through the morning, the landscape gradually changing from scrubby flatland to rolling hills dotted with pine and juniper. By midday, when they stopped to rest the horses by a small stream, Victoria's muscles ached from the unaccustomed riding. "You doing all right?" Wade asked, offering her his canteen. "I'll manage," she replied, taking a careful sip. "How much farther? We'll be there before sunset." Victoria watched as he checked the horses, his movements confident and gentle with the animals. "Mr. Quincy, you said you knew my father for years. What was he like? Out here, I mean." Wade considered her question as he adjusted Penny's saddle. "He was always chasing the next big strike. Restless. Good with cards when he wasn't drinking." He paused. "He talked about you a lot, carried a tintype of you as a little girl. He left us, my mother and me, when I was 12. Mother passed 5 years later. He regretted leaving," Wade said. "Planned to go back once he struck it rich, but he never did." Victoria finished for him. "No, madam, he never did." They continued riding as the afternoon stretched on. Victoria found herself studying Wade's profile against the landscape, the straight line of his nose, the set of his jaw beneath several days' growth of beard. There was something reassuring about his quiet presence. "You never mentioned how you ended up out here," Victoria said, breaking a long silence. "War ended, home didn't feel right anymore, headed west like a lot of other restless boys." Wade adjusted his hat against the sun. "Found I had a knack for breaking horses, saved enough to buy a small spread. And now you rescue stranded young women as well." There was a hint of teasing in her voice that surprised them both. A smile tugged at Wade's mouth. "Only daughters of old friends." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they crested a hill, and Wade reined his horse to a stop. Below them, a small valley spread out, green with spring grass. A modest cabin sat beside a barn, a corral containing several horses and a small creek winding through the property. "It ain't much," Wade said, "but it's mine." To Victoria, after the dust and disappointment of Silverwood Creek, it looked like paradise. The cabin was simple but clean, with 2 rooms separated by a curtain. Wade immediately began building a fire in the stone hearth while Victoria stood awkwardly, unsure of her place in this unfamiliar space. "You can take the bed," Wade said, gesturing to the curtained area. "I'll sleep out here. I couldn't possibly displace you. It's no trouble." He straightened, brushing his hands on his pants. "Are you hungry? I've got some stew I can heat up." Victoria had been raised to be a proper Boston lady, where accepting a man's hospitality without a chaperone would be scandalous. But Boston felt like another lifetime now. "Thank you," she said simply. Over a simple meal of venison stew, Wade explained more about the fraudulent letter that had lured her west. A man named Harlan Everett worked with a network of associates in eastern cities, sending letters to young women who might be vulnerable, those who had lost family or faced financial troubles. "They researched their targets carefully," Wade explained. "They probably knew about your father heading west years ago, your mother's passing. They make the letters personal enough to be believable. But to what end? Surely they don't expect to profit from this deception." Wade's expression darkened. "Silverwood Creek has a mining operation that's booming. 40 men for every woman. Some of these girls get desperate when they arrive with no money and no deed. They end up working in saloons or worse. Others get pressured into hasty marriages. And no one stops this. Laws spread thin out here. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the damage is done." Wade set down his spoon. "I've been trying to intercept Everett's victims when I can. You're the 3rd I've helped this year." Victoria felt a chill. "And the others, what became of them?" "One went back east. The other's working as a schoolteacher in Carson City now." He hesitated. "Your situation was different. When I heard your name in town, I knew I had to find you. Because of my father." Wade nodded, but something in his eyes suggested there might be more to it. That night, lying in Wade's bed, Victoria couldn't sleep. The events of the past weeks swirled in her mind: the excitement of receiving the letter, the long journey west, the humiliation in Silverwood Creek, and now finding herself in a stranger's cabin. A stranger who knew more about her father's final years than she ever would. Morning came with the sound of activity outside. Victoria dressed quickly and stepped out to find Wade in the corral with a young horse, speaking in low, soothing tones as he gradually approached the nervous animal. Victoria watched, fascinated by the patience and gentleness this strong man showed toward the skittish colt. When Wade finally managed to slip a halter over the horse's head, he glanced up and noticed her. "Good morning," he called. "Coffee's hot on the stove." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Wade would rise before dawn to tend to the horses and cattle, while Victoria took over the cooking and mending she found piled in a corner. Neither discussed how long she would stay, but each day, the idea of leaving grew more distant in Victoria's mind. On the fourth morning, Victoria gathered her courage and asked Wade to teach her to ride properly. He seemed surprised but agreed readily. "You need to be able to handle yourself on horseback out here," he said, leading Penny from the barn. "Penny's gentle, but she'll respond better if you're confident." Under Wade's patient instruction, Victoria gradually became more comfortable in the saddle. By the end of the week, they were riding out together to check fence lines and water sources on his small ranch. During these rides, they talked. Wade told her about the places he'd seen, the characters he'd met in his travels. Victoria shared stories of Boston, her mother's genteel upbringing, and her own dreams of adventure that had finally drawn her west. "I sound terribly naive, don't I?" she asked one afternoon as they rested beneath a cottonwood tree. "Naive, maybe, but brave too," Wade replied. "Takes courage to leave everything familiar behind." Even if it was for a lie, Wade plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. "Sometimes the wrong roads lead us to the right places." As Victoria studied his profile against the landscape, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. Wade Quincy was unlike any man she'd known in Boston: straightforward, capable, without pretense. When he looked at her, she felt truly seen. 2 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Wade returned from a supply run to a neighboring town with news that made Victoria's blood run cold. "Everett's been asking about you," he said as they sat at the table that evening. "He's telling folks you stole something valuable from him, trying to turn the law against you." Victoria's hand trembled as she set down her cup. "But that's absurd. I never took anything. It's just a tactic to find you. He's not used to losing his targets." Wade's expression was grim. "Victoria, I think you should consider going farther west. San Francisco, maybe. It would be safer." The thought of leaving filled Victoria with unexpected sadness. "And you? Would you come too?" Wade looked startled by the question. "I can't leave the ranch." "Of course," she said quickly, embarrassed by her presumption. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to suggest, Victoria." Wade reached across the table, hesitantly covering her hand with his own. "These past weeks, having you here, it's been—" A pounding at the door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Wade was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the rifle mounted by the door. "Stay back," he whispered, positioning himself between Victoria and the entrance. "Quincy, open up. We know she's in there." A voice shouted from outside. Wade cracked the door open, keeping his body in the opening. Victoria could see 3 men on horseback in the yard, their faces shadowed by the setting sun. "Evening, gentlemen," Wade said calmly. "Something I can help you with." A man dismounted, tall and lean with a waxed mustache. Victoria recognized him immediately as the stagecoach driver, Everett. "You're harboring a thief, Quincy," Everett called. That Boston girl took something that belongs to me. Stand aside. Miss Mitchell is under my protection, Wade replied. Whatever grievance you think you have, you can take it up with the marshal in Carson City. Everett's laugh was ugly. No law out here but what we make ourselves. Now, I'm trying to be reasonable. Hand over the girl and whatever's left of her money and we'll call it square. That's not going to happen. Wade's voice was steel. You've been running your scheme too long, Everett. I've got signed statements from 2 other women you've tried to swindle. One more complaint to the territorial governor and there'll be marshals looking for you instead. Everett's face darkened. You're bluffing. Try me. Wade shifted, and Victoria saw the rifle now visible in his hands. Now you boys are trespassing on private property. I suggest you leave. There was a tense moment when Victoria thought violence was inevitable, but then Everett spat on the ground and remounted his horse. This ain't over, Quincy. That girl ain't worth the trouble she'll bring you. After they rode away, Wade secured the door and moved quickly around the cabin, checking windows and gathering ammunition for his rifle and revolver. They'll be back, he said grimly. Maybe not tonight, but soon and probably with more men. Victoria felt the weight of guilt crushing her. This is all my fault. I've brought this danger to your home. Wade stopped his preparations and turned to her. No, men like Everett bring their own trouble. I chose to help you and I don't regret it. But your ranch is just land and timber. Wade approached her slowly. Victoria, there's something I need to tell you about your father. Her heart clenched. What about him? He didn't just save my life once. He saved it twice. Wade's voice softened. The second time I was in a bad way, drinking too much, gambling. Got myself into trouble with some dangerous men. Your father paid my debt, got me out of town before they could find me. Wade swallowed hard. He made me promise 2 things that night, that I'd straighten myself out and that if anything happened to him, I'd look out for his daughter if she ever needed help. So that's why you came looking for me, Victoria said quietly, out of obligation. At first, yes, Wade admitted. But these past weeks, being with you. He hesitated, seeming to search for words. Victoria, I've never met anyone like you. Your courage, your kindness, the way you face each day even after everything that's happened. I find myself wishing you'd stay. Not because of a promise to your father, but because a gunshot shattered the window, sending glass flying across the room. Wade lunged, pulling Victoria to the floor as more shots followed. They came back sooner than I thought, he muttered, reaching for his rifle. Stay down and away from the windows. The next hours were a blur of terror for Victoria. Wade moved through the darkened cabin like a shadow, returning fire when possible, always keeping himself between her and danger. When a lull came, he pulled her toward the back door. We need to get to the barn, he whispered. I've got horses ready. When I say run, you run and don't look back. I'll be right behind you. Wade, I can't leave you. You can and you will. His voice was firm, but his eyes, catching the moonlight through the window, were tender. I'll find you. I promise. At his signal, Victoria bolted across the yard, expecting at any moment to feel the impact of a bullet. She reached the barn, gasping for breath, and turned to see Wade just steps behind her, firing back toward shadows moving near the cabin. Inside the barn, 2 horses were saddled and waiting. Wade quickly secured their few belongings and helped Victoria mount. Head north along the creek, he instructed. After about 5 miles, there's a trail that leads up into the hills. My friend Daniel has a place there. Tell him what happened. He'll keep you safe until I come. You're not coming now. Fear gripped her heart. I need to draw them away from you. Wade's hand lingered on hers. Victoria, if anything happens, don't say it, she interrupted fiercely. You promised my father you'd look after me. You promised me you'd find me. A flicker of a smile crossed his face. "So I did." He reached into his pocket and pressed a folded paper into her hand. "Another letter, but you can believe this one." Before she could respond, he slapped her horse's flank, sending it galloping out the back of the barn. Victoria clutched the reins, tears streaming down her face as she rode into the darkness, the sound of gunfire fading behind her. Daniel Turner's homestead was hidden in a fold of the hills, and Victoria might have missed it entirely if not for the dog that announced her arrival shortly before dawn. Daniel, a grizzled older man with kind eyes, took one look at her exhausted, tear-stained face and ushered her inside without question. "You're Wade's friend," he stated simply. "Come in, girl. You're safe here." Only when she was seated by his fire with a cup of hot coffee did Victoria remember the letter Wade had pressed into her hand. With trembling fingers, she unfolded it. "Victoria," it began in a strong, steady hand, "if you're reading this, we've been separated under difficult circumstances. Know that from the moment I saw you in that restaurant, something changed in me. Your father once told me that the greatest regret of his life was leaving behind the woman he loved and the daughter who made him proud. I understand that regret now, because the thought of leaving you feels unbearable. If Providence allows, I will come for you. If not, know that you've brought light back into a life I thought would remain in shadow. Yours, Wade." Victoria pressed the letter to her heart, tears flowing freely now. 3 days passed with no word from Wade. Victoria alternated between hope and despair, starting at every sound, praying for his safety. Daniel was kind but not overly optimistic. "Wade's tough as old leather," he told her, "but Everett runs with a mean crowd." On the 4th morning, Victoria was hanging laundry when Daniel's dog began barking frantically. A rider was approaching, slumped in the saddle. Victoria dropped the wet clothes and ran, her heart in her throat. The horse that stumbled into the yard was Wade's, and the man barely conscious on its back was Wade himself, his shirt dark with blood. "You're here," he mumbled as Daniel helped him down. "Knew I'd find you." The next days were a desperate struggle as Victoria and Daniel fought to save Wade's life. A bullet had grazed his skull, and another had lodged in his shoulder. Fever set in, and Victoria rarely left his side, cooling his brow, coaxing water and broth between his lips, and whispering promises that he couldn't die now, not when she'd only just found him. On the 3rd night, when his fever finally broke, Wade opened his eyes and found Victoria asleep in a chair beside him, her hand clasping his. He squeezed gently and she jerked awake. "Wade," relief flooded her face. "Oh, thank God." "Everett," he asked, his voice a rasp. "Daniel says the territorial marshal arrested him 2 days ago. Apparently, your evidence was convincing after all." She stroked his hand. "It's over, Wade. We're safe." As Wade recovered, Victoria nursed him with tender care, their bond deepening with each passing day. They talked for hours about the future, about possibilities neither had dared imagine before. "My ranch is probably a shambles now," Wade said one evening as they sat on Daniel's porch watching the sunset. "Might take months to rebuild." "We'll rebuild it together," Victoria replied simply. Wade turned to her, surprise and hope in his eyes. "Victoria, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering." She met his gaze steadily. "I came west looking for something I thought my father left me. Instead, I found something he truly did leave you." Wade took her hand, his expression solemn. "I'm not a wealthy man. Life out here is hard, especially for a woman used to city comforts." "I don't want city comforts. I want a life that matters with someone who matters to me." Victoria's voice was sure. "I want you, Wade Quincy." Wade's smile was slow and warm as he pulled her gently toward him. "Then, I reckon we've both found what we were looking for." Their kiss, tender at first and then deepening with promise, was sealed by the golden light of the setting sun, painting the hills in hues of amber and rose, the same hills that would witness their life together in the years to come. 6 months later, a small wedding took place on the rebuilt Quincy ranch. Victoria wore a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair, and Wade stood tall and proud in a new shirt and vest, the scar at his temple barely visible now. Daniel served as best man, and neighbors from miles around came to celebrate. Even the territorial marshal attended, pleased that the Everett gang schemes had finally been stopped. As Wade slipped a gold band onto Victoria's finger, he whispered words meant only for her. "This is a promise you can believe in." And Victoria Mitchell, now Victoria Quincy, believed with all her heart.